Hello, hello, everyone. It's Amanda here with Find Your Feminine Fire. I hope you all had an awesome holiday. I'm super excited to launch the 2018 series of interviews, and I could not think of a more perfect person to launch us into 2018 than the magnetic, gorgeous firecracker, Keeley Olivia. Welcome, welcome.
Woo!
Yeah. So Keeley is a holistic sexuality coach and teacher, and she specializes in helping women to reawaken their raw and erotic primal sexuality and discover their orgasmic potential so they can start having the sex they crave and drop the sexual and body hangups. She's also the author of Unleashing the Female O, which is an amazing book, by the way. I'm going to give you information on how to get that at the end here, but it's required reading should you wish to learn how to birth new galaxies from your vagina. And let me tell you, it is possible. So welcome, Keeley. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you, Amanda. Thank you for having me.
Yes.
Yes.
So hi, Grace. I am so grateful that you are here because hopefully you can hear me. I see my screen is kind of freezing,
Yeah, I can hear you.
but I have had the pleasure of meeting Keeley in person, thankfully. And I would love if you would share a little bit about kind of what led you on this path, if you would. I know it's a long story, but maybe you could just kind of drop into, kind of where you were when you decided that you needed to make these changes around your sexuality.
Yeah, okay. So I think the main point which led me here was when I was in my mid-20s, about 25, I started living with my partner who was my soulmate, if you want to use that term. And we'd been friends for 4 years before, and he'd kind of pursued me, and I decided to have this relationship. Um, and then it was like sex was so hard between us. Like we'd had sexual interactions before, and when we kind of got to this moment of living together and we'd completely changed our lives, our social lives, we didn't drink anymore, we weren't really going out, we'd kind of like come to this place of stability, and it was like sex just didn't happen. And it was this feeling for me of feeling like the best sex of my life is behind me. If it's like I either get to be with this person who I love and adore and just say goodbye to any sexual pleasure for the rest of my life, or end this relationship. And and it was I just felt so stuck in that. It was such a painful experience. So that's kind of ultimately where I was, and what led me down this path of awakening sexuality.
Yeah, well, I think thank you for sharing that, because I know so many women that I talk to that are in long-term relationships can totally relate, where
Yeah.
you're in that situation where you love your partner so much, but you've been together for a very long time and you're like, is this all there is? Well, I guess that part of me is gone and I just should move on, and I can pretend to be sleeping when he comes to bed or whatever it is, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes. So what happened what happened next? How did things start to shift for you?
So, well, it wasn't. It was a very painful experience, and we felt very stuck for a long time, and also it felt like there was a lot of this pressure externally around what male sexuality should look like and what female sexuality should look like. And in our relationship, none of those stereotypes stood up. And so we tried different things. Like I was seeing, I went and had acupuncture for something completely related, and she started asking me about sexuality and really brought it in, and that really brought it to the forefront of like, okay, I need to do something about this. And we tried sex therapy, and we started to do courses, like relationship courses. And at that time, I really believed that it was the relationship that was the problem. He was the problem. I was this like perfect human who had no issues, and if only he would change. And yeah, and very humbly, as I started to go on my own journey of my own sexual exploration, I realized actually that I had a lot of that was actually coming from a deep-rooted disconnect from my own sexuality, and this belief that a man is responsible for my sexuality, a man is responsible for my pleasure, a man is responsible for my desire. So I started to take some different courses. It kind of started for me because I'd experienced a lot of a very challenging relationship with my periods, and that was almost like a routine, really. And I started to realize that that was, in some ways, it was a manifestation of this disconnect from this part of my body. So I started to take courses in female sexuality, and ultimately that led me down the path of doing a teacher training and training as a holistic sexuality coach. Just because the transformation was so profound, was so incredible, and was so life-changing for me. And it was almost like that moment of, you know, like you see your life in a different way, and it's like the veil's been lifted, and you can see how, like, wow, that it coats the whole world. It coats most people in society. So that was what happened next.
Yeah, well, I think that's so interesting. And I love how in your book you talk about that. And there was some study that you mentioned where they kind of rate sexual experiences, and really how they rate it for the man is if they had an orgasm, and for the woman if it wasn't painful and if the man had an orgasm, basically.
Yeah, I think that comes from Peggy Orenstein's TED Talk. And
Okay.
she wrote a book called Girls and Sex. I'm pretty sure that's where that research comes from. And it's, yeah, women rating their sexuality not on their own pleasure at all.
Yeah. And I think too, that's another thing where coming along, we're never taught on our own what sexuality is. Hi, Lisa. Or
Yeah.
how to find that within ourselves. It's always like, well, when I meet the right guy, they're going to teach me how
Yeah.
it's going to be so amazing. And Prince Charming is going to show me how it's done. And then I'm going to like just melt into pleasure. And it's not always that way. Actually, it's very rarely that way.
Yeah. And what had happened just before that was I'd had a relationship in my early 20s, which was like very sexually intense. It was like explosively sexual. And that really awoken in me this like huge erotic potential and desire, and yeah, also this expectation that somebody else had that power and it wasn't within me. And really what was happening in that relationship was it was almost like, because that was alive in that other person, it was waking up in me. And I created the belief that without that person, I didn't have that for myself.
Yeah. But I also love how then you moved to say, you know, like a lot of things you were thinking it was the relationship, you were thinking it was your partner, and then realizing you were going to stop looking outside to find these solutions and kind of go inward. And so I would love to chat a little bit more about, you know, what is unleashing the female O and what does that mean to you?
Yeah. So unleashing the female O, to me, that phrase is, so it's about two things. It's about women awakening to their body's full orgasmic potential, the kind of the sleeping serpent of desire, of eroticism, of sexuality that is inherent within all of us, and that kind of like gradually gets shut down, and this kind of view that women aren't really that interested in sex, but men are, and it feels like as an adult, like that's the standard narrative. So it's about women claiming their sexual power and awakening and experiencing sexual pleasure in their own bodies for themselves. And the other thing, what Unleashing the Female is about breaking the silence. And I think this is something that I speak about in the book, is certainly when I was a teenager, like, I was the horniest person I know. And so were all of my friends, like every single one of them. Like that, those teenage years are just like, you just feel so much sexuality through your body. And it certainly felt like it was insatiable because of slut shaming, because of expectations around what you should and shouldn't do. You know, you shouldn't get pregnant, you should respect your sexuality, all these messages. And so it felt like I couldn't do anything with it. I just felt it in my body. And then there was this wider acceptance that that is the norm for males, but it's not the norm for females. And so it feels like as you get older, and that becomes more and more shut down in women. So it's about speaking about that, like women speaking openly about masturbation, about how they masturbate, how they self-pleasure, how they learn to orgasm, different types of orgasm they have, being comfortable with using words for their female genitals, you know, reclaiming the word pussy, using the word cunt, using these words which can be really powerful but have so much baggage and connotation because of the way that they're used in a culture.
I think that's so true. And I think you mentioned this, and I too know when I used to hate the word pussy so much. And now I love it. And I actually was just at a business meeting the other day, and I just like came right out. I don't even realize that I need to kind of, not everyone is as comfortable with the word, but I'm like, you know what? Part of making it more normal is using it. So, but it's true, because even with cunt, that's one I'm still working on.
Yeah.
Only because, like you said, like with the negative connotation, that's one in my experience that has been way more negative. And when it's been used towards me, it's with such scathing hatred that in my own personal experience, that's what I'm still working through with that one. But so many people have that experience. Like, I feel like, you know, women in general, as you will agree, you know, we've never been taught a lot of us have never been taught our proper terms for our anatomy. So then it's something that right off the bat then has shame. But I love your YouTube video you did all about reclaiming pussy.
Yeah, thank you.
She's got the best YouTube channel, by the way, guys. You have to check it out. I'll post that at the end, but oh my gosh, she is so creative with her videos. So yeah, and speaking of that, what would be, you know, one thing, if you could give one tip around, you know, embracing your pussy, what would that be? Just one easy thing for people.
Yeah. So I think looking at your vulva and changing the thought patterns, the ideas that you have about the way that she looks. I think there's so much around pussies being ugly, pussies looking a certain way, or there's something wrong with them, like oh, mine's bad, or mine's different, or like there's something inherently wrong. And so looking at your vulva in the mirror every day and just like starting to appreciate it like a piece of art, and seeing the kind of like natural beauty that you might see in a tree. You know, when you see those trees and they have vulvas in the side, it's like in a tree, you would see that as beautiful. And so just seeing the inherent beauty in one's vulva can really start to change the experience. And it feels symbolic for the relationship we have to our entire bodies as women. Yeah.
Well, and I think too, because like, you know, with most experiences, a lot of women haven't seen other women's vulvas. And if they have, it's been through porn, which 90% of the time they have labiaplasty, or they either go back and digitally retouch. And so that's actually not what normal vulvas look like a lot of the time.
Yeah.
So I love that, how, and in embracing whatever it is. I remember as a, coming along, like feeling really uncomfortable about my own vulva and being like, this is wrong. This is wrong. It's so ugly.
Yeah.
And that is a journey in loving it, but it's so powerful. So now that you have this newfound relationship with your pussy, how do you feel like your life has changed?
So it's kind of subtle in a way, because it's like a feeling internally, but it's like a feeling of total self-acceptance, of complete trust in one's abilities and one's choices, like this deep inherent sense of self-love and this sense of conviction and personal power to just like be okay with yourself and life, and know that you are able to create what you want to create, to do what you want to do. Yeah. So it's subtle, but it's like this deep internal core sense of self-love, self-appreciation, self-respect, wonder and awe.
Yeah. And I know sometimes a lot of these things that we talk about can seem esoteric or kind of woo-woo, but I love that you have such a scientific background.
Yeah.
And I know didn't really mention that in your bio, but you were also a researcher, correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
So did that kind of, did that outlook change how you viewed this work at all?
So I feel that my experience of being a scientist and being an academic researcher has hugely impacted the way that I think, the lens with which I see the world through, and not in the way that people necessarily think. So one of the ways which it means that I feel that I can see different concepts and how they fit together. And also I studied chemistry, which is a pure science, and my experience of studying pure science is like studying chemistry is like studying like pure magic. Like that is what it is to me. It's like when you study the fundamental phenomena that makes up the world, it is so mind-blowing and so incredible. And so I feel that my experience of studying science really enhanced that magical worldview. Like I never grew up in a religious place or a religious family, and it was kind of like this, it wasn't really something I concerned myself with, but there was this narrative that science and religion were these two opposing forces. And I remember when I was doing my degree thinking like, this is the biggest proof of God, not necessarily a man in the sky God, but of like this like universal magic that possibly exists. Like how can these two things be opposing? And so yeah, in that respect, I think that's how it's influenced the way that I see this work. And also, I would say perhaps a more controversial way in which it's influenced how I see this work is something that's very strong to me is that science is a man-made subject. It is a lens to view the world. It isn't necessarily always inherent truth. A lot of empirical science like can be aspects of it, but a lot of research that is done is it's an interpretation of a phenomena. And so I think for me, how it's impacted this work is it's made me more open-minded. I don't like to be too certain on things that I've not experienced in my own body. For me, it has to be personal experience is without a doubt the like most important thing.
I love that. Personal experience is the most important thing. And thank you for that beautiful explanation. I love that so much.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to point out too, for anyone that is watching, if you have questions, please feel free to post them and we will get to those. If for any reason we don't get to them while we're doing the live, we'll come back and comment. So please do. If you have any questions for Keeley, ask away. And, but I'd also love to kind of dive into a little more on the birthing galaxies through your vagina.
Yeah.
What that means to you and explain what that is, if you would.
Yeah. So this concept of birthing your galaxies from your vagina, it kind of comes from this experience of having cervical orgasms. So when I first learned to orgasm, I learned to orgasm clitorally, so from my clitoris, and in a very specific way. And I kind of talk about this in the book, and I go through this whole journey. And then I became awakened to this idea that you could experience different types of orgasms in different parts of one's pussy. And so I then went on this journey and this quest to want to learn how to have cervical orgasms. And upon doing so, my experience was, it was like an experience of birthing a galaxy from one's vagina. And what I mean in that is, the best way to think of it is, it was like some sort of like connection to something bigger than me. It was like a mind state of total union with the cosmos, or like all of time and space. And it's like people think that you need to take psychedelics or take drugs to have these kind of experiences. And I'd done that in my early 20s, and it was in many ways very like, it was too shocking to my system. It wasn't always enjoyable. And it was like, wow, I can actually experience these sublime, profound states through orgasm and through cervical orgasm. And it would almost be like in these states of orgasm, it was kind of like it was happening visually, but it felt like it was happening in my body as well. Like I remember one experience where it was like this pink, like explosion of like fairy dust. It was like, felt like it was like expressed, like coming out of the top of my body and like mushroom clouding around my body. So these experiences is what birthing new galaxies from your vagina is about. And it is also a little bit of a play on, it's like from nothing, from complete blackness, everything is created. So the whole universe is created. And it's like, that is a woman's womb. And from the womb, that is where all of life is created. That is where every single living creature came from, a female womb. And the womb is just a black space, a void. And so it's also about the creative potential of life, of the female pussy, and of when we connect to that raw energy of that, which is sexuality, like what can be birthed in our lives from that space.
Yeah. Connecting to that energy, what cannot be created. Connect to that. That is so powerful. And I think, another thing that's interesting that you mentioned is you mentioned how you went from your journey. So when we talk about these cervical orgasms, it is not something that might happen overnight for you. And that's
Yeah.
okay, because it doesn't necessarily happen overnight.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it requires some dedication to exploration and
Yeah.
allowing what is to surface. So
Yeah.
I know Keely's got some great methods to help you with that. So we'll get to that in a moment. But I'd also love to ask you, Keely, because I love to ask my guest this question, is if you could have your like ideal vision played out with women exploring this and experiencing the power that they have within, what would your ideal vision be?
Yeah. So it feels, when you say that, it feels like it starts young. It's like as soon as a female baby is born, this it's like so many things are already lined up. And so in that moment, how can we allow the natural playfulness and pleasure of the human body to be a natural source of our lives as we grow up? And so as little girls, when we start to feel the pleasure in our body, how can we learn that that's a beautiful thing and that it's okay to experience, and that yes, there are certain boundaries and things that need to be in place to keep that safe, but how can we learn that experiencing the pleasures of our bodies internally is beautiful, is inherently beautiful, rather than learning that it's something bad and wrong and to shut down and to be afraid of. And so it kind of like it feels like it stems from like this inherent knowledge that the body is beautiful and to experience that is beautiful. And then as a young girl moves into teenage years, like really knowing how to honor her body, having rites and rituals and guidance from older women who can teach her in the way of enjoying her body, experiencing her body, and experiencing the pleasure for herself. So again, removing this like control and fear and shut down. And I feel that is, if a woman can move through her teenage years with that kind of experience, with loving her body, with creating a beautiful experience of her body, with knowing how to the orgasmic capabilities and pleasures of her body, I think then she will grow into a fully empowered woman. Yeah.
That is so beautiful. I think that we're working on that. Well, we're getting there.
Yeah.
And our mothers that are doing this work on themselves can be that example, because that really is the best way to teach. And I would love it if that was the way our sex education system was. Got some ways to go. But the more of us out there, then the least we can spread the word.
Yeah, and you're leading the way with that, Amanda. I'll look to you for advice when I have children.
Well, I have a 5-year-old, and I do find that is a challenging thing to navigate, because there's no great information out there, just creating it based on what I know. But people are always asking that, like, how do you raise your kids to be sex positive? I mean, there's getting to be more and more information about that out there, but a lot of times it's not what you say, it's what you do. That's what they learn from. So yeah, I never had naked dance parties with my mom when I was a kid, but Mimi does have this. Feel good and free in our bodies, and like there's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, I feel like that's important. So, but anyways, I would love for you to share. You've got an awesome program coming up, and if you would just share a little bit more about what you have coming up, and I will also share how you can find more about Keeley and follow her on YouTube. Like I said, she's got awesome videos, and her amazing book, Unleashing the Female. Oh, I will. There is a way to download that. So tell us a little bit more about what you have going on.
Yeah, so I have a program, which is a private coaching program. It's a 10-week program working with the Jade Egg, and also working with coaching specifically around sexuality and sexual awakening, and that's called Orgasmic, Wild and Free. So that is application only. It's open to applications right now. And if you go on my email list, then you will just hear more about that ongoing on a regular basis. I publish a new YouTube video every Monday. And yeah, there's Unleashing the Female O, the book. And so you can get that at bit.ly/female O. You can also get that on my website, which is www.keeleyolivia.com.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to write that on here really quick just so people can see. And then I'll also put it in the notes. But so you said bit.ly/female O.
Yeah.
So you can download her book here, which I highly recommend. It is so, so good. And you can also find her on her website, which is KeeleyOlivia.com. And her YouTube channel, which there are links on your website for all those good things, correct?
Yeah.
Yay! Yay! Well, I am so grateful to have you here. Thank you so much for taking the time. I know the time difference is a big one, so I appreciate you making it work. And also, if there's any last things you'd like to share.
So I guess the other thing that comes to mind, and this is in Female O, is a really powerful practice that women can do to just awaken their bodies, is just shaking, putting some music on and having a good old vigorous shake from the pelvis and just sounding, freeing one's voice. I feel that when a woman awakens her pussy, something happens with her voice that is very powerful, and truth comes out and magic comes out. So that's the last thing to share. And then just thank you, Amanda. You're incredible. You are a hero of mine. I think you're beautiful. And thank you so much for this beautiful interview.
Thank you. Thank you. And I appreciate you so much for being here. And again, ladies, feel free. If you have questions, ask away, and we will get back to them in the comments. And we will look forward to seeing you next week. Have an awesome day, everyone.
Bye.